Good evening, everyone. Tonight's guest is Richard Estep, author, paranormal investigator, and TV personality. You might have seen him on TV's Haunted Hospitals, Paranormal Revenge, Paranormal Night Shift, Paranormal 911, Destination Fear, or A Haunting. His love of all things ghostly began at a very young age, fed by staying in his grandparents' haunted house in England and by a constant stream of binge reading at his local library. He didn't begin to actually investigate hauntings until the mid 90s. He brought his passion with him when he moved to the United States in 1999. He started a paranormal team in 2006, but these days, most of his cases are research projects for books. He has written more than 40 books. He makes his living as a paramedic and clinical educator for a private ambulance company and hospital system. And for 3 years, he gave tours at the infamous Stanley Hotel in Estes Park, Colorado. We'll be talking to Richard Estep tonight on Unraveling the Darkness. Good evening, Jason.
Hey, how's it going, man?
Good. How are you?
Good. Crazy week.
We say that almost every week. Crazy week, busy week, something always going on. Special night tonight. Had to move it to Thursday to accommodate scheduling, but that's just fine with us.
Yep. Yeah, super excited for this week's guest. Yeah, it'll be a lot of fun.
Yeah, highly recommended from some of our previous guests. Messaged him a couple months ago and got him worked in. So very happy. I know we need to probably get going. You got to be out early tonight if possible. So without any further ado, we will bring in Richard.
All right.
Good
Gentlemen,
evening.
good evening.
How
Hey,
are you
Richard.
tonight?
Thanks for coming on.
Thank you. Pleasure to be here.
So, gosh, you are very accomplished. Over 40 books, several TV shows. Let's start at the beginning. What got you into the paranormal?
Well, like you mentioned in my intro, I grew up in a grandparents' house that was haunted, and as a young boy, that sent me down the road of going to the library, check out ghost books, and from ghost books to more ghost books to investigations, and I'm still doing that 50 years later.
Wow. That's we had talked about this before where we think neither of us have been overseas to investigate. Is it any all the techniques are the same, but are the spirits any different?
I don't think so. I mean, in the same way that people are always people wherever you go, right? So, I mean, there are cultural differences, of course, but people are still going to be human beings, just because they're not wearing the same meat suit that they were in their lifetime. I think many of them, the ones that are intelligent as opposed to residual, have the same hopes, fears, dreams that we do, maybe with a slightly different perspective on the universe. But yeah, they're not that different.
Nice. Uh, so what made you come to the States? Why did you move over here?
I had a job with IBM, and here in the Rocky Mountains is a beautiful place to be. So I took that job as a computer engineer. I liked it, settled down. 9/11 happened. I had a career change. Shortly after that, I joined the fire service, became an EMT, then became a paramedic. And long story short, I'm still here, quarter century later.
Can't beat the Rocky Mountain area, part of our area here, and lots of paranormal activities and cryptids and such.
Yeah, apart from the cost of living, the Rockies are great.
Yes, especially down where you are.
Yeah,
Uh,
for
quite
sure.
quite expensive in that area. Glad to have you in the region and the knowledge that you bring. Some of our guests, Aaron Taylor, Alan from Trails into the Unknown,
Alan
speak
McGargle, yeah.
speak highly of you, and we're finally glad to have you on.
Oh, I speak highly of them in return. It's good to be here. Thank you.
Such good people,
Mhm.
we've just done this for over a year now, celebrated a year ago, and all the people in the paranormal field seem to be great people.
I think there are many great people in the paranormal field for sure.
Many, not all. Yes. So paranormal. Did you do the Stanley gig first, or were you doing TV stuff before that?
I did TV on the back of, I'd written a book called World's Most Haunted Hospitals
Oh,
about 10 years ago. And they were coming up with a show called Haunted Hospitals. And I'm pretty sure what happened was that literally the producers Googled the words haunted hospitals and up came my book. They reached out to me about that. Would I be interested in doing the show? And yeah, that's where it started. I did 5 seasons of Haunted Hospitals,
wow.
which spun off into Paranormal 911, where we talked to cops, paramedics, firefighters about their ghostly experiences. That spun off into Paranormal Night Shift, where we kept the same format but talked to night shift workers. So there are 8 seasons between those 3 shows, a very similar format. I got a job at the Stanley because I'd wanted to investigate there, and for many, many years it wasn't allowed. So I decided the only way I was going to get any exposure to that was to get hired and start giving tours. And I did that for about 3 years.
And how about the spirits there? Are they? Everyone talks about not very friendly or having some problems. What did you encounter at the Stanley?
I think that's garbage, to be blunt. And I think the reason for that is Stephen King, and Stephen King, I think, saved the Stanley from the hotel has been bankrupt more than once in its time. Stephen King was essential in putting it back on the map. And so there should probably be a statue of Stephen King at the Stanley somewhere. But when he did that, The Shining gives us this idealized version of the haunted hotel. Um, the lady in the bathtub and all of that kind of stuff. It's great. It's iconic. It's a fantastic ghost story, but none of it bears any resemblance to what actually happened at the Stanley. It's a very friendly place, and I think a lot of the spirits there are there because they like it. It's a positive haunting, and people go there weekend after weekend. They get married, they do family reunions, they sightsee. These are happy people. So much as the blood curdling imaginations of Stephen King have benefited the Stanley, it bears no resemblance to what the hotel is really about.
That's interesting and a great perspective from someone who's been able to investigate there. Um, is there a spirit there that you liked talking to or interacting with?
I think that one of the most there are several that are fascinating to me there, and the one that fascinates me the most is Lucy because um, I don't believe she's actually real. The concert hall is the most haunted part of the hotel, in my experience, and down in the basement there is a room called Lucy's room. And for the longest time, they were telling stories that Lucy was this girl that froze to death at the Stanley one year and was supposedly homeless, living in that area, froze to death outside the Stanley, and haunts the concert hall forever, and specifically one of the um, one of the rooms in the basement, which is a fantastic story, but there's not a shred of evidence to back it up at all. There's certainly no documentation of a young lady by that name freezing to either on the Stanley's premises or anywhere nearby in Estes Park. But that tale was just told over and over and over again. And I think that on the ghost tours now, something in that concert hall loves interacting with people and almost role playing as if it is Lucy, whether it's a thought form like a tulpa that has been created because the story was told so many times, or whether there is another spirit that is just having fun with this tale, I don't know. But I always enjoyed sitting in Lucy's room down in the basement in the dark.
So after this, so had you written books prior to going to the Stanley, or did you start that after you left the Stanley, or was it
No,
during that
I've written
time?
before. My first book was In Search of the Paranormal, which was written in 2014, I believe it was. So I've been writing for 11 years now.
Wow.
I'd written that, and I'd written a couple of others beforehand. So I'd already written, yeah, put some books out before I ever worked up there.
So 11 years and I counted over 40 books on your webpage.
Mhm.
That is quite a bit of writing.
Well,
This
I do give classes in writing, and one thing I like to point out to people is you pick up any book at all. The average book has a word count of 250 words on a page. So I write at least 4 pages a day, 1,000 words, unless something remarkable happens. But for the most part, I do. So if you think about that, that's 365,000 words a year, right? Well, let's go with 363, taking Christmas Day and New Year's Day off. If you figure the average book is anywhere between 40 and 60,000 words, you can easily see how 4 books a year happen, which is about what I'm at right now. You just, like anything else, have to write diligently and consistently, and do it daily, which is what I do. So.
That's quite the
Yeah,
word
it's a
count.
really amazing mentality
It's
behind
really
it when you break it
Yeah.
down to the numbers like
It's really
that.
not though. This is what I love telling people. Like, I assume you guys you're on Facebook, right? You're on
Yes.
social media, you send emails. So if you leave everything related to your job aside, I'm going to bet money that you've probably written 250,000 words by 5 p.m. in terms of Facebook comments, posts, texts, and emails, just fun stuff that's not making you a living. Is that right?
Sure.
Yeah, probably. I
Yeah.
work in IT, so yeah, I live on email.
Right. So most people have. I mean, again, leaving your work aside, whether it's writing up to friends, back and forth, those kind of things. So that's a page of a book. The truth is that most people, anybody could really do with some motivation what I do. You just have to make sure that you get your word count where it belongs. I stopped arguing with people on social media a long time ago when I realized, number one, it never really does anything but inflame a situation. Nobody ever convinced anybody with a Facebook post for the most part. Certainly not with a comment. And you get sucked into this, back and forth on Facebook with somebody. Before you know it, that's 250 words. They don't care what you have to say because they're convinced they're right. You're convinced that you're right. And you've just taken a page from that next book that you could have written and you've just literally thrown it away. So I try and be mindful of that. And I usually get my words done by 6 o'clock at night. It is not that hard to do.
Wow. That's a great way to think about that, because yeah, when you really look at it, how much time do we waste on something like that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And time is the one resource you can never get more of, no matter how much money you may have. Time is the most finite, valuable resource we have. So I try and make my time and my words count.
Well, obviously with over 40 books you have. So, and more to come.
More to come. I have contracts for the next couple of years too, and I have a board behind me of works in progress that I don't think is that visible on the screen, which is probably a good thing. But yeah, I have a lot of irons in the fire, and that's the way I like it.
It's not bad to stay busy. So,
It's not.
yeah. So let's talk about a few of those books. Jason and I had picked a couple books each. I tried to stay in the region, and the Haunted Longmont book does kind of intrigue me because that is something that's in the region. It's not far from us. It's about 75 miles. We talked about both being close, and let's pick a story out of that you would like to talk about, but of course not give away anything. But what was one of the best locations in that book?
I mean, right there on the cover is the Dickens Opera House, which everybody in Longmont kind of knows. It relates to the Dickens family, Charles Dickens relatives. And there are several Dickens properties in Longmont, but that's probably the best known one. It's right there on the corner of 3rd and Main. So we drive by it quite often, and was often used, back in the 100 years ago or so, for performances, theatrical performances, things of that nature. Right now, it's kind of a bar restaurant, but lots of paranormal claims, particularly from upstairs in that building. There is still like a theater up there. There is still live music. There are still performances. So I find the Dickens family and their connection with Longmont to be super interesting. But the Opera House is kind of, I would argue, the most iconic building in the city of Longmont. It's the one that most people recognize just by looking at it. So its ghosts tend to be, I think, performers, artists,
Hmm.
creative individuals, and I kind of like that. I jive with that a lot.
That's somewhere that we have looked at and are hoping to reach out soon and get in there and investigate. It's a beautiful building.
It sure is. The only problem you're going to have, I can guarantee you, is noise pollution because it's at the intersection of two very busy roads and Longmont's bar district. So you get a lot of raucous noise until you hit like 2 o'clock in the morning. You get a lot of noise contamination inside that location, but that's the cost of investigating there.
Sure. Yeah. We did a music venue in Denver and had to do it on a Sunday night because, most of those places do have some kind of music going on Friday, Saturday night. So even
Right.
a Sunday would be a good night.
Yeah, absolutely. You minimize it where you can, right? I mean, people always think paranormal investigators investigate at night because ghosts come out at night. We know different. In fact, I've found many locations that are more active in the daytime. But, investigating at night is a function of the fact that most of us have day jobs and that the world is just quieter at night. So it reduces that risk of contamination, whether it's traffic on the roads, electricity running through the grid, foot traffic, all those kind of things.
Yep. So Jason, you had picked a book. Which one would you like to ask about?
Yeah, I would love to talk about some cryptids. So I've always, loved the idea of cryptids in general, these creatures
Mhm.
roaming around unseen, to most people.
Yeah.
Blurry pictures and, you know, just eyewitness statements, really. So yeah, I've always been really interested in Mothman, coming out of
Mhm.
Point Pleasant. So what got you interested in that to write your book, Mothman Sightings and Investigations?
I love ghosts. Ghosts are my first love. They always will be. I'm very passionate about hauntings and haunted houses. That stuff's in my blood and it goes back my entire life. But it's not all that I want to do. So, I wanted to keep in that realm of the strange, and I've written and have more books scheduled to write on UFOs, for example. But I hadn't really done anything about cryptids for the most part. And I just found Mothman to be a fascinating story. So I reached out to Tobias Wayland, who is a respected researcher of all things Fortean in general, but Mothman in particular. And he'd written a book about the Lake Michigan Mothman sightings. Again, there's this kind of misconception that Point Pleasant is the only place you get Mothman, but there are sightings all over the US and around the world. And I'd asked him, hey, I would love to do a search for Mothman, where we would go, we would investigate this phenomenon, we would put boots on the ground, and I will kind of learn about it from you as a seasoned Mothman researcher. And that's what we did. So, of course, we went to Point Pleasant, but we also went to, Van Meter, Iowa, and places like that. We looked at the Van Meter Visitor, for example. We talked to some luminaries in the cryptid field as well. Um, and I had a great adventure doing that. And the book basically chronicles that search for that red-eyed winged cryptid.
So in your book, you hit on a few different ways that Mothman could be kind of traveling or migrating around the
Mm.
U.S. So through your research, kind of what do you feel is the most logical way this creature may be traveling? Either straight flight, it is a winged creature, or interdimensional travels talked about with Mothman. What have you come up with?
I'm a big believer in there's some truth to Keel's theory of ultra terrestrials and the super spectrum and things like that. I don't think we are literally looking at a physical creature that flies around and nests and things like that. Where is the Mothman poop, right? For one thing. And also, most Mothman encounters don't involve physical contact of any kind. Sometimes Mothman is seen fluttering its wings, and sometimes it flies without the wings fluttering, almost gliding, which is interesting. Aerodynamically, that should not work. So I'm kind of with Keel that this is, I think, just one facet of a much bigger, weirder global phenomenon. Keel had this idea that there are spaces in our world where his super spectrum, for want of a better term, which is kind of like some kind of otherworldly, dimension or whatever you want to call it, would bleed through into our own. And he said that we tend to write those places off as being haunted or UFO hotspots or cryptid hotspots. And when you start paying attention, it's interesting that a lot of places you have the trifecta of cryptid sightings, UFOs, and a reputation for being haunted. Black Forest in Colorado, for example, has a reputation like that. Skinwalker Ranch, one that we're all familiar with in Utah, has a reputation for that. I investigated the Hinsdale House in New York. Still have to finish that book. Hinsdale House has UFO sightings, ghosts and hauntings, and supposedly Wendigo in the woods behind the house. So I like this idea. I find it compelling that we might be looking at this one big, broad phenomenon, and Mothman is just one facet of it.
That's very interesting. And actually, my next question was going to be, do you think there could be more than one? But I think that, that really covered it. And, Aaron and I have touched on interdimensional in the show before, possibly string theory, where you have these, interlaying dimensions, for lack of a better word, and they
Yeah.
ripple. And then you have the hot spots, right, where you have
Mhm.
these collisions between.
Yeah.
So I've always been fascinated in that aspect of it.
Me too. I like the idea that it's tempting to think that there is this unifying theory of the paranormal, right? This idea that rather than looking at separate phenomena, ghosts over here, UFOs, cryptids, we're just looking at the same thing from different angles or aspects. And it may well be, this was something Keel talked about a lot in his work, but it may well be that it chooses what facet it shows to us. The whole cosmic trickster thing really intrigued me.
Wow.
Very interesting.
Yeah. That's something that we're pretty lucky as a team when we go to investigate that we have, I am definitely more on the ghost side of the paranormal. But Jason is into the cryptids, Michelle's into
Mhm.
the cryptids. So we have that well-rounded where, if we think something else is going on, at least we would have people that are willing to open their eyes to that and maybe open our eyes to that too.
Yeah, it may just be that it depends on where you stand and which angle you view this phenomenon from.
Yeah. Uh, the second book that I chose is The Nightmare in Villisca.
Mm.
Um, for that book, were you there over several days to investigate that and learn about what was really going on at that location?
Multiple visits. So not just several days, but multiple visits, multiple times of the year. I try and spend as much time in a location as I can. So uh, unfortunately, and I'll choose my words with some degree of care, but since the house has changed ownership,
Mhm.
it's not a place I will ever go back to until it's treated with more respect and the commercialization is done ethically. I'm no fan at all of the way that it's being marketed right now. I think it's immensely disrespectful and in poor taste. But yeah, I was able to spend several days living inside the house with fellow investigators, doing experiments, talking with Johnny Hauser, who was the caretaker and who wrote the foreword to the book. Um, and again, it's such a complex case, depending on how far down this rabbit hole you want to go. I talked to people who were convinced that this was a dark, malevolent haunting. I talked to others who thought that the whole town was built on cursed ground. This
Hmm.
idea that Villisca itself is kind of a tainted place. Um, I'm not entirely sure what I think, which is usually how my books end, by the way. If you like a book that ties everything up nice and neatly in a bow, don't read one of mine. Because I think the most honesty you can give in the paranormal field is to say, here's what I think, but I'm not sure. And I like the people who are not sure. When we talk about individuals in the paranormal field that I like to work with, um, the more certain somebody is that they have the right answer and that their way is the only way, the less I tend to get on with them and the less I tend to respect.
Yes.
I like those who are uncertain, who keep asking questions and say, well, this is my perspective, but my mind is open to being changed. What have you got? You know? And unfortunately, that's not the most common viewpoint, I think.
Yeah, and I see too much of the phrase scientific method being
Hmm.
thrown around where, because you're measuring EMF, you're taking
Yeah.
that as scientific evidence, right? Which, it's interesting and it's
It's data, but
Right,
but
it's
you know,
data. Yep.
you're going to say scientific object. Well, where's your hypothesis and what are you testing?
Yep.
And at that point,
Where's your control
often
groups? Yeah.
people go into vapor lock. I know a lot of people think that they'll take offense to the term pseudoscience, but this is a pseudoscience. I mean, there's no point denying it. Doesn't mean you can't be professional about it, but it would be foolish to believe that we are doing the same thing as PhD parapsychologists are. Guys like Dr. Kieran O'Keefe, for example. We're not doing the same thing that they're doing. They're applying rigorous academic standards and peer review and things of that nature. And peer review is not sending somebody an email of your latest EVP and saying, "What do you hear?"
What do you
You
think,
know,
man? Do you hear
yeah,
the same thing I am? Yeah.
absolutely. So it's right up there with describing yourself as a historian when you are not, in fact, a qualified historian. I've written
I've been to
history books. And
Gettysburg,
what's that?
but I've been to Gettysburg.
Exactly. I've written books about Gettysburg. I've written books about military history, but I am not a qualified historian. And I think it insults people that have devoted their professional lives to becoming that, you know, to call yourself that. So I cringe every time somebody puts that label on me. It's one of those things I don't like. I'm interested in history. I'm as diligent as I can be about my research, but hell, I get it wrong too, more than one occasion. So yeah, let's call it what it is. It's a pseudoscience, but let's try and behave as professionally as we can, investigating within the constraints of that term.
Yeah. And we're in a field where there are no experts, right? So how can we
You know, you hear
really
this a lot, and
say,
I agree and disagree. I agree in that there is the only paranormal experts are parapsychologists, right? That's says that on their doctorate. Um, but what you can bring is expertise to the paranormal field in another field that applies. So, for example, I'm a paramedic, and if I'm taking on a help case, um, I want with the customers, the client's consent. I want to know what medications they're taking. And I want to know how many of them have the side effect of hallucinations and things of that nature. I am an expert in medicine. I mean, my degree is in paramedicine.
Yep.
So I'm obviously not a physician, but I have a good, rigorously tested background in medicine. I am an
Right.
expert. Am I an expert in ghost hauntings, UFOs, and cryptid? No, because there ain't no such thing. And that's the difference. And I think the key thing to do is bring in experts by all means. Um, but a true expert is someone who has credentialed expertise in another field of endeavor. It is not Jeff from Arkansas who fights demons on his spare time. I'm sorry, but it is.
Right. Right.
You may have taken an online course where you read the Warren's biography, but you are not an expert.
oh boy. Yeah. Sorry to any Jeffs in Arkansas.
Yeah, no offense to Jeff. Richard from Longmont is no expert either, but I'm not calling myself a demonologist.
Yeah. No,
I
I
picked
agree.
Jeff in Arkansas kind of out of thin air, but
Yeah. Just a
but
little joke. It's okay.
yeah, but still,
We
you
like
know,
to have
it,
fun too.
there are so many self-professed individuals in this field who will tell you, I'm a demonologist. I'm
Mhm.
qualified. Here's my piece of paper. I just printed this from my $99 online course.
Yep. And
I'm
how
an
are you going
empath.
to test it?
Exactly. I'm an empath. I'm a Reiki master. I'm this, I'm that. And I'm not trying to take a dump on people's beliefs. Um, it's simply when we try and pass these things off as proven fact. I definitely have an open mind, but I think if your mind is too open, people will throw all kinds of garbage in it like it's a dumpster.
Yes. Definitely. I want to step back to the Velisca book real quick, and I understand the whole thing going on there. It is quite a ordeal with the present owner and everything that's happened.
Mhm.
But to go to the times that you were there,
Yeah.
we've heard out of there, you get what you get what you go in with. If you go in wanting to have a good investigation and maybe contact the family or the kids,
Mhm.
then that's what you're getting. If you go in kind of on a high and mighty thing, looking to try to contact the person who did then you're getting that darker side of the investigation. What did you see and feel when you went and investigated there?
I'm a big believer. Firstly, I'm a huge nerd. So I love equating this to that scene from The Empire Strikes Back, where Luke is on Dagobah and he's going into the tree to face whatever this darkness is inside the tree in the cave. Remember that scene? And
Yep.
he says, Master Yoda, what's in there? And Yoda's line is, only what you take with you.
Mm,
And I feel like that's so applicable to what you just said. Because if you go in, as you say, expecting darkness and, doom and gloom and despair, odds are you're going to find it. But if you go in with an open mind or even a degree of optimism, I don't think necessarily you're going to have a bad time. That house was not the nightmare for me that it has been for so many other people. Um, so I went in, I had a fairly small group because if you've ever been in that house, it is very, very small. Really, 4 to 6 people is the maximum you want in there. So we kept our numbers at like 4. But there was a night I was there with my colleague Sarah, and I will never forget the fact that. Have you been to Velisca, you gentlemen, by any chance?
Not yet.
it's
No.
definitely on our list, but we have
Yeah.
not been there yet.
So there's no running water inside the house and no electricity. You have to go out to the barn to check your P-mail, as it were. So we noticed that whenever I would go to the barn to, answer the call of nature, leaving her alone in the house, there would be footsteps up on the second floor. So then I sent her out to the barn, nothing. I went out to the barn, footsteps. It was getting active when there was only a female in the house,
Yeah.
which struck me as very interesting and very odd. We can conjecture as to why that might have been, but that was very, very interesting. Um, I also spent some time in the barn itself. I know that one of the suspects, one of the chief suspects, Reverend Kelly, has been seen in the barn, which is kind of interesting because it isn't the original barn. The house is original, the barn is not, but it's in about the same spot where the barn would have been back at the time of the murders, back in the early part of the 20th century. Forgetting my words there. So people have reported seeing Reverend Kelly there. No one investigates the barn though, because everyone kind of gets sucked into the house. But I slept in that house, and once you get past the fact, there's the creep factor of knowing that people were horribly in their sleep in the room you're sleeping in. But once you get past that psychologically, I slept very peacefully. The closet door in the kids' bedroom has a habit of opening and closing itself. That has not been satisfactorily debunked, in my opinion. We had flashlights switch themselves on and off. And what I mean by that, by the way, is not the mag light flashlight trick, which is very easy to explain.
Yep.
I am talking now about the fact that LED flashlights would switch themselves off and on, which is an entirely different mechanism. So that was cool. Got a laughing EVP, which sounds like a child's voice as well. So I would say that it was, for me personally, moderately impressive, moderately active. But I also had the opportunity to interview people for that book where their experiences were, to them, terrifying. So your mileage may vary, again, depending on what biases you bring in, what lens you view the world through.
Yeah, and I think your first, accounting there with how you leave to go to the barn and your co-investigator, your partner heard the footsteps
Mhm.
above, right? Like that could be
Yeah.
interpreted a lot of different ways depending on the way you're looking at the investigation. You'd be like, oh, the female presence soothed them,
Mhm.
right? And they showed themselves when a male
Yeah.
wasn't there. Or, I could see someone saying, oh, that was the dark presence trying to intimidate a female alone in the
Right.
building, right?
Which,
It's all,
good luck with the women I work with too.
yep,
Talk
same
about
here.
strong, yeah, talk about strong female characters, but you absolutely raise a great point. We like to, and I think this is years of us growing up on horror movies, to be honest, but we like to impute like sinister motives to certain of these things because it's an easy explanation to jump to, but it's not the only one.
Hmm. Yeah, that's a very good explanation of what can happen there as far as like the difference between two people investigating, one leaving, and something happened.
Mhm.
So I think Jason had picked out a UFO book for the next.
Yeah, I want to talk about Colorado UFOs for a minute, if that's all right.
By all means.
So I've always been, ever since I was a kid, I was always fascinated with cattle, which you
Mm.
touched on. Well, you covered our research, Snippy, a
Yeah.
famous horse in Colorado in 1967. There were conflicting reports about the bones changing colors and
Mhm.
high radiation levels around
Yeah.
the body. Out of your research into the Snippy case, what do you believe is, I'll say, truth versus folklore or urban legend?
I'm going to come back with I don't know, and you're going to hear that from me so much, because as you say, you rightly point out, there's so much conflict going on. I mean, they brought in veterinary experts from the University of Colorado. There are some experts that looked at this and said this is clearly a case of just natural decomposition, expansion of gases. The skin tears, and you have these razor sharp lines that look like they're surgical, but in fact they're just tear lines. And then you have others saying there is no way in nature that you see these kinds of injuries caused by decomposition and tearing alone. And you just don't know who to believe. And that is true in this case for me also. So the bones do still exist. The bones are still out there. But of course, the more organic components are long since gone. We're missing the photographs that you really wish had been taken to kind of settle all this. I think that this is the case also that if memory serves me correctly, I think this really was the first big, well-publicized case in terms of cattle mutilations. It probably wasn't the first one to occur, but it was the first one that went, for want of a better term, viral. So most UFO histories kind of refer to this case as being ground zero for animal mutilations. And yeah, chaps, I don't know, honestly. I think either side could be correct. There are a few things that just don't quite add up about the whole situation. Problem is, they tried to sell the skeleton at one point. One rule of thumb I live by when it comes to not just the paranormal but life in general is whenever money is changing hands or is proposed to change hands, you have to be skeptical. You
Absolutely.
have to be appropriately skeptical if cash is involved. And so that's kind of where I'm at with this story now. I'm not saying I think it's genuine or not. I'm saying the waters are so muddied, and now we're looking at so many decades have passed. I doubt we'll ever know the truth.
Right. I think that's a very respectable way of, answering that question and going about that, because, it was 1967,
Mhm.
what, 30, 40 years, till you were able to get in and research it. And, like you said, the waters get so muddied at that point.
Well, I keep thinking about the fact that you go back to 1967, and what's on the air? Star Trek and shows like that. We're at another of those points in popular culture where people are looking towards the skies for hope, but also for inspiration and for answers. So I always look at, when it comes to something UFO related, what's playing on TV. Mothman, one thing that's kind of fascinating. I know this is a callback, but number one, there was a big UFO flap associated with the original Point Pleasant Mothman sightings, which are occurring at around that same time, right?
Right.
The other thing is that, how does Mothman, do you know how Mothman got his name?
No, I'm going to say no on that.
There was a newspaper article out there that happened, and they were originally calling it like the Big Bird, the Big Black Bird. Primary sources in Point Pleasant told me most of them called it like the Big Black Bird initially. And then there was a newspaper headline that said something to the effect of, move over Superman, Batman, make way for Mothman. It was like a bored reporter that coined that phrase. And what was one of the biggest network shows on TV at the time? Batman.
Yep.
So you got to look at popular
Interesting.
culture
Hmm.
to place this stuff in its context.
Well, we look at that for us as paranormal investigators, but the regular public with ghost hunting, right? Because you see this rush of ghost hunting shows, and
Mm.
next thing you know, everything is paranormal, and there's a ghost here, there's a ghost there, right?
Well, I mean, and I'll go you on further, but I mean, in terms of Ghost Adventures being immensely popular back when it started, I think Paranormal State was prior to that was the
Yeah.
one that started talking about darkness and demons and possession on a regular basis.
Hmm.
As a paranormal investigator until about 2009, I could count the number of quote unquote dark cases I'd investigated on one hand. And then all of a sudden, it's all over TV. Everyone's getting possessed, and there's a demon under every bed. And that trend continues today. And of course, you look at what dominates the box office. You have this $1 billion $1 billion Conjuring franchise. Haunted dolls are everywhere, or allegedly haunted dolls. Annabelle is touring, for goodness sake. I mean, not only do you have this massive blockbuster movie franchise with the Annabelle movies, but the actual doll, a doll that is so dangerous it has to be kept away from people unless you're going to take it on the road or fly it first class in order to film on Ghost Adventures, right? Then it's
Right.
okay apparently to let it out. I just, you really, to place this stuff in context, you have to look at what's going on in our culture in general. And that was a long-winded way of saying I think there's a lot more to that original San Luis Valley mutilation case than met the eye.
Yeah, that's
Annabelle.
interesting. And then, yeah, with Annabelle, you've got the rule of numbers or averages there too, right? With what was it, the travel to New Orleans, and you had the big prison break, and then in Pennsylvania where her handler, passed away, and you've got, a couple of these little weird occurrences, right, that happened along.
Sure. But I mean, we saw this with The Exorcist and the Curse of the Exorcist. We saw this with the movie Poltergeist, the
Poltergeist.
Curse of Poltergeist. That stuff makes Hollywood PR executives just give thanks.
Yep.
As far as Annabelle goes, my opinion on this is really simple. If that doll is as dangerous as some people say it is, why are you allowing it on planes? Why are you allowing it on the roads? Why are you allowing it out at all?
Yep.
And if it isn't that dangerous, why are you saying that it is?
Well, it goes back to what you just previously said about, the bones and when money exchanges
When
hands,
money
right?
changes hands. Yep.
100%. 100% it does.
So, yeah,
Yeah.
And we've had a
we
guest on our show, Victoria J.
Oh, yeah. Good people,
Folklorist.
Victoria.
Yeah,
Yeah.
wonderful woman, done some amazing research, and she's publishing her book on demonic fantasy right now, which I believe is
She
starting
is.
from where The Exorcist on up, and how that influences
Yeah,
current
and
movies.
she had talked pretty heavily about my book, In Search of Demons,
Mhm.
where I kind of made that point. 80,000 words of me crossing the US and the UK trying to find demons, and I failed. But Victoria's right. This fantasy of demons. I'm not saying demons aren't real, but I will say this: I haven't been able to find any in 30 years of paranormal investigating. Number two, if they're real, these things have to be so rare. What are they doing in the basement of a house in the Midwest?
Yes,
Why are you not out causing trouble in the Middle East? Or, what
right.
bang for the buck is there doing that?
Yep.
But again, follow the money. There are plenty of people that are willing to sell their services as a demonologist or are
Demonologist.
willing
Yep.
to train you to be one. Money, money, money. Breaks your
Yep.
heart, really.
It
Yeah, and I
does.
just had this conversation with a friend the other day of I don't remember what famous location it was we were talking about, but one
Mhm.
where there's supposed to be a demon, and I'm like, you're in the presence of pure evil. It's got the power to sway people, to
Mhm.
possess people, right? Make them do their bidding, and
Allegedly.
allegedly, and it's going to spend its time in a Midwest basement,
Mhm.
waiting for the weekend when people come in to ask what your name is and can you make this device beep to show itself. And
Right,
I just,
exactly.
I can't buy into that part of it.
You don't have a world-class athlete playing Little League.
Right. Perfect. Yes.
Nice.
But
And
this is where, Satan's foot soldiers supposedly are dispatched to. It just makes no sense whatsoever. Until you look at the fact that there are very valid psychological reasons for people to think this way. Paranormal, and I've done some shows which involved these cases. It became a joke on one of the shows I was on. Don't give Richard the demonic cases because he will not say it and will not do it. I feel immensely almost angry about the way that people cash in on this because you have individuals living in fear in their own homes,
Mhm.
especially if demons are part of their belief system. I'm an agnostic. So demons are not part of my belief system. But if you are of the Christian faith or any of the faiths that believe in demons, you can be absolutely terrified if somebody tells you that you are possessed or attached or have one in your home. I mean, it has ruined people's lives,
Yeah.
and that is not okay.
Well, and it's one of the easiest ways to give people a reason, for the bad things happening in life that then benefit other organizations.
Yeah. I mean, let's call it like it is, right? I assume you're talking about the church. Demons have made a great control mechanism, as has organized
Yep.
religion for humans for thousands of years. Um, they've also been, I think, when we go back to ancient times, they were a very convenient black box for us to shove things we didn't understand into, And see, here's the thing: when you get down to brass tacks, if you are looking at ancient humanity, your horse goes lame unexpectedly, demons, There's a flash flood when there shouldn't have been one, demons. Wife in childbirth, demons, curses. There's a comfort in that. What's more terrifying by far is just the possibility that we might be all alone in a rudderless universe, that there's
And
nobody
crap
at the wheel.
happens.
And
Yep.
this stuff happens. Bad things happen to good people, And no matter how much the church might say it can protect you, nobody can.
Right.
Yeah.
Soapboxing, gentlemen, and I'm sorry, but it's something I feel
No,
very strongly
please.
about.
No, we have no problem with that. You had mentioned a place earlier, or we had mentioned together, somewhere that we got to visit this summer, and that was Gettysburg.
Oh yeah,
Wasn't on our agenda to talk about, but I love talking about Gettysburg. Um, you know, 50,000 people lost. It's been called the paranormal playground almost because of all the activity that is around that place. Um, your feeling on Gettysburg?
you have more casualties in one weekend than the entire Vietnam War in
Yeah.
terms of Americans. So I adore Gettysburg. It's one of the very few places I can see myself retiring to. Um, the past just feels so much closer there. It
Yeah.
feels as if you could just reach out and touch the 1860s. You know what I mean? It has an atmosphere that very few places I've ever been to have. It feels more historic than some 800-year-old castles I've been to, and I think that um, the people of the town, the park service, everybody that works so hard to preserve Gettysburg for future generations has done a remarkable job. But I also think that that contributes to some of the paranormal activity. In many ways, it feels like it's a town out of time, stuck in time, like the clock never moved on past 1863 in some
Mm,
ways,
yeah.
which is a good thing in many ways, but also explains, I think, why, when I was there, I heard and recorded the sound of cannon fire on Pickett's Charge, clear as day. And we were there at first light. There's no way that reenactors are up at sunrise firing cannons off.
Right.
Recorded the sound. I should say, two of the people I was staying with recorded the sound of a bugle out on the battlefield at like 4 a.m. as well, when no one should legally be out on the battlefield.
Yeah.
Um,
I got a battlefield at 3 in the morning at about the wheat field. So
mhm.
that was to hear that and to audit. It wasn't even a recording for me. It was audibly heard. And it was crazy. So crazy.
And it's also a town I think that every American should visit because it has so much to teach us just from a historical point of view. I think that we are in real danger, and yeah, I'm stepping right back up onto my soapbox. We're in real danger of forgetting the lessons of the Civil War, or of deriving the wrong lessons from it, and quite why every American school kid doesn't go on a trip to that place at least once to walk that ground for themselves, to experience it, to ask the hard questions, um, is beyond me. If you get the opportunity to go to Gettysburg, go out of your way and do it because it is an incredible place. The
Mm,
ghosts are almost secondary for me. The whole place is haunting enough.
mhm.
Absolutely.
A beautiful town, and all the people are very, very open to talking and communicating with anyone. We had Mark Nesbitt, who
Oh
had
yeah,
written those
Mr.
books.
Ghost of Gettysburg. You talk
Yep.
about an expert He is the man on Gettysburg Ghosts, right? Uh,
Yes, he is.
love Mark, fantastic guy,
He's a
fantastic.
great person. Um, Richard, our time is coming to a close, and it has been great having you on. Um, pull your soapbox up anytime. We're more than happy to chat with you when you have a free minute between writing and all your paramedic stuff and teaching. I'm sure you're a very busy person. Thank you for being a paramedic. It takes someone with dedication to be able to do that too.
Thank you very much, gentlemen. And thanks to everyone that tuned in or is catching the replay. We appreciate it.
You do have a couple books coming out in February and March. Can you tell us those real quick?
Yeah, I have a book in March 11. I have a book on monsters. I don't know if you can bring that up yet. It might not be on my website yet, but if not, you can certainly see it on Barnes and Noble or Amazon's website. That is, after having done Mothman, I'd wanted to do another cryptid book that was more broad ranging and cover things like not just the Loch Ness monster, but some more exotic ones like, the Yowie, things of that nature. So my book on monsters and cryptids comes out, March the 11th, published by Visible Ink Press. But before that, February 11th, I don't know what it is about the 11th. There we are, Monsters, Myths, Legends, and Real Encounters, up for pre-order now by Visible Ink Press. And on the 11th of February, so a month before that, is my fire EMS memoir. It's called Help Is on the Way and looks at my 25 years in the emergency services. A very personal book to write, not an easy book to read, I think. And so if there's one book of mine I would wish people would give a chance to, this is that book.
Richard, having been in that field myself, one of my, of course, we have a little bit darker sense, and when we read stuff, the Knife and Gun Club that came out of
Yeah.
in
Denver
Virginia,
Health.
is that pretty close
Yeah.
to what you're going to have there?
No, it isn't.
Okay.
I love The Knife and Gun Club. It's a fantastic book. Firstly, that's a picture book as much as it is a story, right? The black
Right.
and white photographs in that book, and it is sitting on my shelf. The photographs in that book really tell the story of what DG was like back in the day. That's not the book I set out to write.
Okay.
This is more of my personal odyssey from on 9/11. I walked up to the closest firehouse and knocked on the door and said, "How do I sign up?" Having just seen the towers come down and the FDNY people, firefighters inside, I was very moved and I wanted to do something. And so I signed up that day, and I'm still working 911 now as we speak. So it's what that odyssey is like. And I really wanted to put people on the fire truck with me, but also inside, the doors of an ambulance, life, death, all that goes on between those two states, I wanted to talk about. So it is not exactly the bloodbath that Knife and Gun Club is. But I like to think it isn't boring either.
Good. All right. I will be picking that one up as well.
Same here.
Again, thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you.
Being in the region, we hope to run into you one day, meet you in person, and
Yeah, it'd be great.
who knows? Maybe there could be an investigation sometime.
Stranger things have certainly happened.
Yeah. Richard, again, thanks for coming on tonight. I know you're super busy.
My pleasure. Thanks very much for having me on. Thanks everyone that watched us.
We're going
Thanks
to
a
put
lot,
you in the
Richard.
green room. We'll catch up with you in just a minute.
Sounds good.
I was excited for tonight.
Same here.
I am still excited because he has so many books. I have a wish list that I'm going through. I'm currently reading In Search of Demons. It's a great book too,
Well, one of the big things I picked up from talking with Richard that he does is the due diligence. Like you said, no one has the answers in this field, right? We can't as of yet, right? Whether, quantum computing, you never know if that helps, turn the page there. But really, until we can sit down and interview a spirit, we don't have any idea. And he's doing the reps, going out and talking to people, doing his research, doing these investigations, and then presenting what he found. And you got to respect that.
Yep. If you're coming in late, go back and watch this episode. You can catch it on YouTube on the live side of our channel. It was a great, great night. Again, Richard, I see you down there. Thank you for coming on. Jason, as always, it was a good night for us. I know
Absolutely.
you need to get moving. So we look
Yep.
forward to having everyone back next week. And we have Short Bus Paranormal.
All right. We'll see y'all next week. Thanks, everybody.
Unraveling the Darkness would like to thank Horn Paranormal Research for sponsoring our show. If you're craving more paranormal content, don't forget to check out our YouTube and Facebook channels at Way Out West Paranormal and Unraveling the Darkness. You can catch all of our episodes of Unraveling the Darkness on Apple Podcasts, Facebook, and YouTube. Be sure to like and subscribe as it helps others find the show and join in on the paranormal fun. Thank you so much for tuning in. Until next time, keep your lights on, stay safe, and remember, the truth is out there, and it might just be closer than you think.